I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're 10 years old.
Okay.
You've just spent days, maybe a week, on a train. You're crossing half a continent, leaving everything you know behind in, say, Virginia.
Everything. Your whole world.
You get off at a tiny station in the middle of the night. It is pitch black. You climb into a wagon, and you're just bumping along this rough, uneven track. You look over the side, expecting to see, I don't know, something.
A tree, a fence, a light, anything.
Anything. But there is nothing.
Just a void.
A void. Listen to how the narrator describes it in the text we're covering today. He says, and I'm quoting here, "There was nothing but land. Not a country at all, but the material out of which countries are made."
The material out of which countries are made. That line, it just stops me in my tracks every single time I read it.
It's incredible.
It's not a description of a place. It's a description of potential, of a terrifying emptiness. It suggests that before you can have a society or a life or anything, you first have to confront this raw, chaotic matter.
It's genuinely unsettling. It really does feel like arriving on another planet.
The moon.
Exactly. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are heading right into that void. We are going to the Nebraska frontier to tackle Willa Cather's masterpiece, My Ántonia.
A true classic. But I think we need to address the elephant in the room right away.
Go for it.
For a lot of people, especially people who, maybe read this in high school, this book gets filed away as, well, as that nice, cozy story about a pioneer girl.
Right. Nostalgic, pastoral. It's the literary equivalent of a warm quilt.
A warm quilt. That's perfect. You just think of golden wheat fields and beautiful sunsets.
And our mission today is to maybe take a bit of a sledgehammer to that assumption.
A big one. Because when you actually dig into the stack of sources we have in front of us, the novel itself, specifically book one, the Shimerdas, and then you add in the biographical context and the really fantastic scholarly introduction by Gordon Tapper. This is not a cozy story.
No, it is not. It's actually quite brutal.
It's a deeply complex study of trauma, of the immigrant experience in its rawest, most difficult form. And it's about what Cather herself called the erasure of personality.
Erasure of personality? What does that even mean?
It's about losing yourself. It's about being dropped into a landscape that is so big, so indifferent, that it doesn't even acknowledge you exist. It just blots you out.
And we have a lot of ground to cover. We have the text of the first book, Tapper's introduction, which really gets into the psychology of it all, and some key biographical notes on Cather herself.
And we're going to be exploring this central tension today, the tension between that pastoral ideal, that golden, hazy memory of childhood, and the often grotesque reality of survival.
Grotesque is the right word. We're talking about suicide.
We're talking about wolves eating people.
We are talking about families freezing to death in what is essentially a cave.
It's heavy stuff.
It is. So let's start with the world this book was born into, because context is everything here. Willa Cather published My Ántonia in 1918.
1918.
So if I walk into a bookstore in New York City in 1918 and I'm looking for the next great American novel, what am I finding? It's not stories about dirt farmers in Nebraska, is it?
Absolutely not. You're 100% right. In 1918, the literary world was completely dominated by what we call the drawing room novel.
Drawing room novel. Okay, break that down.
Think Edith Wharton, Henry James. These are brilliant books, but they're about smart, articulate, wealthy people in high society parlors.
In Boston or New York.
Exactly. Having these witty, clever conversations about morals and manners and money. The setting is civilized, the dialogue is polished, and it's very much looking toward Europe, toward the British literary canon, as the gold standard of culture.
So the American novel was still, in a way, trying to be a European novel.
Precisely. It was all about manners. And then here comes Willa Cather writing about soil.
Literally dirt.
Dirt, farmers, immigrants who can barely speak English, people who smell like garlic and, live in holes in the ground.
It must have been a shock.
Gordon Tapper spends a lot of time on this in his introduction. He points out that, at the time, for a serious author to write about farmers in Nebraska was considered a breach of decorum.
A breach of decorum. I love that phrase. It really stuck with me. It sounds like she showed up to a black-tie dinner wearing muddy boots.
That's exactly what it was like.
Yeah.
It was a literary scandal in its own quiet way. Cather herself even said that the novel of the soil wasn't fashionable. But this is where you see a huge cultural shift happening. Tapper connects Cather's work to a really important critic from that era named Van Wyck Brooks.
I've heard the name, but unpack his significance for us. Why does Tapper bring him into this conversation?
Brooks is the catalyst for this change. He looked at American literature in the early 20th century and basically argued that it was suffering from a split personality.
How so?
On one side, you had what he called highbrow culture. This was the stiff, academic, European imitation stuff we were just talking about, totally disconnected from real American life. He called it the genteel tradition.
The professors and the socialites.
Right. And on the other side, you had lowbrow. Think cheap dime novels about cowboys, gunslingers, gold rushes. Pure pulp.
Okay, I see the split.
Brooks argued that what America desperately needed was a middlebrow literature, something that had the artistic merit and the psychological depth of the highbrow stuff, but was rooted in the actual soil and reality of the American experience. He wanted art that wasn't afraid to get its hands dirty.
So Cather is effectively answering that call. She's taking the Wild West, which up until then had mostly belonged to the pulp fiction aisle, and she's elevating it to high art.
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
She's saying that a Bohemian immigrant girl plowing a field is just as worthy of complex, serious literary treatment as a duchess in a drawing room. She's creating a whole new American mythology. Instead of the Pilgrim Fathers or the Southern aristocracy, she is centering the entire narrative on the immigrant pioneer.
And she's writing what she knows. I mean, looking at her biography, the parallels between Cather, the author, and Jim Burden, the narrator, they're uncanny.
They're almost one and the same, at least in their origin story. The narrator of the book is Jim Burden. He's 10 years old. He's an orphan. He moves from Virginia to Nebraska to live with his grandparents.
And Willa Cather.
Born in Virginia, moved to Nebraska when she was 9.
Okay, so Jim is basically Willa in a mask.
A very thin, transparent mask, yeah.
Yes.
And both of them felt this massive shock to the system. Cather said in her letters that when she first arrived, she felt a kind of erasure of personality. She felt blotted out. And she gives that exact feeling, almost word for word, to Jim.
Which brings us right back to that landscape. I want to dwell on this idea of erasure a little longer, because Jim arrives by train, then he's in this wagon. And the sensory details Cather uses, it's not fresh country air.
No, it's not romantic at all.
He feels sticky and grimy. He's been on a train for days, sitting on these red plush seats, and he's reading a book about Jesse James.
Which is such a nice touch, isn't it? He's reading this romanticized dime novel version of the West, while at the same time he's actually entering the brutal, empty reality of it.
Right. And then he gets into that wagon with the farmhand, and it's just darkness. He says, and this is another great quote, "I had the feeling that the world was left behind, that we had got over the edge of it, and were outside man's jurisdiction."
Outside man's jurisdiction. For a 10-year-old, that is terrifying.
It's beyond terrifying.
It suggests a lawless, maybe even godless void. He even says he didn't say his prayers that night. He thought there was no way God could hear him out there. The space is so vast that the whole concept of a personal God or even a personal self starts to just disintegrate.
But then the very next morning, everything flips. He goes from this terror of the void to, I don't know, what would you call it? A religious experience.
I think that's fair. You're thinking of the garden scene.
The garden scene, yes.
Yeah.
It's the morning after his arrival.
He's just wandering.
He's lying in his grandmother's garden, leaning up against a big pumpkin. The sun is warm, the bees are buzzing, and he has this profound epiphany. I've got the quote right here. "I was something that lay under the sun and felt it, like the pumpkins, and I did not want to be anything more. I was entirely happy."
And then comes the kicker, the most important part of that quote.
That is happiness, to be dissolved into something complete and great.
Dissolved. That is usually a scary word. If I dissolve, I'm gone. I cease to be me.
It's annihilation.
But for Cather and for Jim in this moment, it's a positive loss of self. It's a relief. Gaber's introduction compares this directly to Buddhist enlightenment or Ralph Waldo Emerson's concept of the transparent eyeball.
Oh, right, the transcendentalist idea.
Exactly. Emerson wrote, "I am nothing. I see all." It's the experience of the sublime. The landscape is so huge it completely crushes your ego. But in being crushed, you stop being Jim Burden, orphan from Virginia, scared and lonely, and you just become part of the light, the wind, the pumpkin.
You're unified with the cosmos.
That's it. So that erasure can be terrifying, but it can also be ecstatic.
It's beautiful, but it also reinforces that idea that you have to give up your individual identity to really exist here. And the land itself feels alive. It feels like it's in motion. I love the description of the running country. The grass is this deep red color of wine stains, she says, and because of the constant wind, it looks like the whole country is running.
The whole country seemed somehow to be running. It's not static. It's not a still painting you look at. It's this living, breathing ocean of grass. And into this ocean, you have another arrival.
The Shimerdas.
And this is where the real mission of the book kicks in, because Jim, for all his fear, has a relatively soft landing. He has his grandparents, he has a white frame house, he has a warm stove and a bath waiting for him.
He has gingerbread baking in the kitchen.
Exactly. It's the sort of American dream version of the frontier experience. But the Shimerdas, they are arriving in the exact same place at the exact same time, but they might as well be landing on a different planet.
Let's talk about that first contact. Jim sees them at the train station. It's utter darkness, as he says. They're just huddled together. And the way the conductor talks about them, it tells you everything you need to know about the racial and social hierarchy of 1918 America.
Oh, it's so telling. The conductor points them out to Jim like they're a curiosity, a sideshow. He calls them a foreign family. He mentions the pretty brown eyes of the little girl, Ántonia, but it's almost like he's describing a specimen in a zoo, not a person.
And Jake, the farmhand who's with Jim, says later that you're likely to get diseases from foreigners.
Yeah, that is that raw, early 20th century nativism creeping in.
Which is an important piece of context.
It's critical. Tapper contextualizes this heavily. Cather is writing this book at a time of massive, heated immigration debates in the United States. The whole idea of the melting pot was boiling over into resentment.
So this isn't just a historical novel, it's a contemporary one.
Very much so. She's writing this right when xenophobia is peaking, just before the very restrictive immigration acts of the 1920s. So by portraying the Shimerdas with such deep sympathy, she is actively pushing back against that dominant, ugly narrative.
So Jim goes to visit them a few days later, and the contrast in their living conditions is just, it's shocking. They aren't in a house.
No, they're in a dugout.
A cave. They live in a cave cut into a bank of earth.
And let's be very clear, this is not a cozy hobbit hole from a fantasy novel. It's described as being more like a badger hole.
It's dark, it smells, it's damp, and they are being systematically exploited from day one. We have to talk about Credit.
Krajik, the villain of book one.
And the tragedy is, he's one of them. He's a fellow Bohemian.
That's the cruelest part. He's their interpreter. He is their only connection to this new world, their only guide. And he is swindling them blind.
Wow.
He sold them this terrible piece of land at a hugely inflated price. He's overcharging them for basic supplies. And he actually sleeps in the dugout with them, listening to every single thing they say so they can't make other friends or find out the truth about how much things should cost.
He's actively keeping them isolated just to bleed them dry. It's predatory.
It is. And you can see the toll it takes on the whole family. The tiny details of their poverty are so visceral. The bread scene, for example, that just, it kills me.
The sour, ashy gray bread.
Tell us about that.
Mrs. Shimerda gives them this bread as a gift. It's a gesture of hospitality, but it's barely edible, and they realize later that she's making it in this old, unclean bin, hoping the fermenting residue from the last batch will act as a kind of sourdough starter, because she doesn't have yeast.
It is such a heartbreaking detail, because it shows this loss of domestic capability.
What do you mean by that?
In Bohemia, in the old world, Mrs. Shimerda probably knew how to run a household perfectly. She knew the rules of baking, of cooking. But here, she's helpless. She's trying to apply old-world logic fermentation in a new context where she lacks the basic ingredients, and the result is just this sour gray mush.
It symbolizes how their whole culture is sort of curdling in this new environment.
It is. It's not just that they're poor. It's that their skills, their knowledge, have been rendered incompetent in this new world.
And the most tragic figure in all of this has to be the father, Mr. Shimerda.
He is the heart of the tragedy of Book One. In the old country, he was a weaver, a musician, a man of culture and refinement. Cather takes great care to describe his hands as white and skilled and delicate.
But on the prairie...
Those hands are useless. You can't weave wheat. You can't play the fiddle to build a house or plow a field.
He's always described as dignified and sad. He wears this old silk scarf and looks like a figure out of an old portrait. He doesn't fit. He doesn't belong.
He represents the part of the old world that cannot survive the transplant. Some things, like the children, they can be replanted and grow strong. They're young enough, flexible enough to adapt. But an old, specialized tree, you uproot it, you move it across the world, and it dies.
And he knows it, doesn't he?
He knows it. There's that devastating scene where he puts his hand on Jim's shoulder and just begs the grandmother, teach my Ántonia. He knows he can't give her the future she needs in this place.
And then, of course, there's Ántonia herself, the namesake of the book.
And she is the complete opposite of her father. She is pure energy. She is life. Jim describes her eyes as big and warm and full of light. She runs to meet the wind. She wants to learn every single word. She's a sponge.
She is the mission of the book. But their relationship, Jim and Ántonia, it's complicated from the start. They're friends, but there's this weird power dynamic. And I want to stop on the rattlesnake scene for a minute. Because when I first read this, it felt, I don't know, a little staged. I don't mean poorly written. I mean, the event itself felt like a performance.
You are absolutely picking up on something crucial there.
So set the scene for us. Where are they?
They're out of the prairie dog town. It's a sunny, beautiful day. Cather describes the grass as velvety. It feels idyllic and safe. They're just exploring, looking for badger holes.
Yeah.
And then the monster appears.
And the description is so over the top. A circus monstrosity. Abominable muscularity. It sounds like a dragon from a fairy tale.
Cather is absolutely leaning into the mythic here. It's St. George and the dragon. It is the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And Jim, the boy, he freezes. But then instinct kicks in. He grabs a spade and he kills it.
And Ántonia is just overcome with admiration. She calls him big mans. Oh, you, just like big mans.
That is exactly what Jim, as a 10-year-old boy, wanted and needed to hear.
But if you look closely at the text, the victory feels kind of cheap. It feels unearned. He admits later, almost as an aside, that the snake was probably very old and sluggish.
It had just eaten a prairie dog. It was basically asleep.
Right. So it's a mock adventure.
It is, and this is where Tapper's analysis in the introduction is so critical. If you read this as just a simple adventure story, sure, Jim is the hero. But if you read it as a study of gender dynamics, Jim is massively overcompensating for something.
What's he overcompensating for?
Look at their dynamic before the snake appears. Who's usually leading the way? Who's stronger?
Ántonia is. She's older, she's more vital, she's often the one protecting him in a way.
Exactly. And Jim, on some level, resents that. He feels feminized by his own passivity compared to her raw vitality. So when this big phallic snake appears, it's his one opportunity to reassert the traditional big man role. And Ántonia immediately feeds right into it.
You is just like big mans?
She claps her hands, she shouts it. And you're right, it is kind of patronizing in its own way. It's like telling a toddler they're so strong for lifting a milk jug.
Yeah.
And Cather knows exactly what she's doing. She allows Jim his moment of glory, but she winks at the reader. She lets us know the snake was old and fat and lazy. She's showing us that Jim's masculinity is fragile. It relies on performance and on external validation from a woman. Whereas Ántoниa's strength is just natural. She is the land, he is just an actor performing upon it.
And Tapper connects this directly to Cather herself, right? Because this is a huge part of the scholarship surrounding this book and Cather's life.
Yes, this is what's known as the surrogate theory. Tapper discusses Cather's sexuality, her lesbianism, which was something of an open secret in her time. And he suggests the character of Jim Burden is a fictional surrogate for Cather.
So Cather wants to write a story about her love and deep admiration for a powerful woman like Ántonia.
Correct. But in 1918, you can't publish a novel about a woman being romantically infatuated with another woman. It just wouldn't fly. So she creates a male narrator, Jim. Jim allows her to gaze at Ántonia, to admire her warmth and her light and her strength in a way that is socially acceptable for the time.
But because Jim is really Cather in disguise, he doesn't behave like a typical romantic male lead.
Not at all. He never really makes a move. Their relationship remains strangely, well, asexual. He loves her, but he loves her as an idea, as a memory. He doesn't try to possess her physically. Tapper points out that Jim constantly retreats from sexual maturity. He prefers the safety of their childhood bond.
So the snake scene is like, Cather trying to put on the male costume for her narrator for Jim, but it doesn't quite fit.
In a way, yes. It's a performance of masculinity that, if you look closely, deliberately exposes itself as a performance.
That is fascinating. It completely changes how you read that scene. It's not just an action sequence. It's a deep commentary on gender roles and identity.
Everything in a Cather novel is double-layered like that. Nothing is ever just what it seems on the surface.
Speaking of double layers and things hiding just beneath the surface, we have to go deeper into the darkness here.
Yeah.
Because up until now, we've talked about the sun, the grass, the open space. But Cather dropped something into the middle of book one that is straight out of a Gothic horror nightmare. I'm talking about Peter and Pavel.
The two Russians. Even their introduction is ominous. They live apart from everyone else. They're described as aloof. Pavel, the one who is sick, is described as having eyes that fairly snapped. He's a man who is constantly looking over his shoulder.
And on his deathbed, we finally find out why. He tells this story. And a warning to you listening, this is extremely graphic. We need to walk through this slowly because the imagery is just It's terrifying.
It takes place back in Russia, or, given the geography, maybe Ukraine. It's the middle of a brutal winter. There's a wedding party.
The party's been going on for days. Everyone has been drinking heavily. It's a scene of excess and celebration, and they decide to set off for home in their sledges, their sleighs, at midnight.
A terrible idea.
A terrible idea, because then the wolves come.
And not just a few wolves, hundreds of them. Cather describes them as black shadows on the snow.
The description of the sound is what gets me. The screaming of the horses, the panic. It's pure chaos. One by one, the sledges in the wedding party are overtaken.
Cather uses this chillingly simple phrase. She says they were upset in the snow. You just see this cloud of snow and black shapes, and then that sledge and the people in it are just gone.
It's a massacre, and it quickly narrows down to just the one sledge, the lead sledge, and it's being driven by Pavel.
And Peter's there too, along with the brand new groom and the bride. The wolves are gaining on them. They are right at the back of the sledge. And the groom is trying to fight them off, trying to protect his bride. And Pavel, he makes a choice.
A horrific, unthinkable
To
choice.
save the sledge, to lighten the load so they can go faster. He struggles with the groom.
He throws the bride to the wolves.
Or he pushes the groom, who is trying to save her. It's all happening so fast, but the text implies he actively, deliberately sacrificed the couple to save himself and Peter. He throws them to the pack.
And that's why they're in Nebraska.
That's why. They were cursed. They were chased out of their own village. Even their own mothers wouldn't speak to them. They were complete outcasts. They had to run to the other side of the world to escape what they did.
But why? Why does Cather put this story right here? We're supposed to be reading about kids growing up on the prairie, and suddenly we have this tale of cannibalism and human sacrifice.
I think it serves a few crucial purposes. First, it completely shatters the pastoral calm of the novel. It's a violent reminder that nature isn't just pumpkins and sunshine, it's predatory. It will eat you. But maybe more importantly, it illustrates the incredible burden of the old world.
It's the old world darkness crashing into the supposed light of the new world.
Exactly. These immigrants, they bring their trauma with them. You can move your body to Nebraska, but the wolves follow you in your head. That's why Pavel is dying in terror. On his deathbed, he thinks the wolves are coming for him again.
And look at the effect this story has on Jim and Ántonia. They're kids. They should be horrified, and they are, but they're also fascinated. Jim says they took a painful and peculiar pleasure in the story.
Painful and peculiar pleasure. That phrase could be the subtitle for the whole book, couldn't it?
It really could.
It's this idea that beauty and horror are right next to each other, always. And it gives them a secret. It gives them a secret language. They are the only ones who know the truth about Peter and Pavel. It bonds them in a way nothing else could.
It connects them in a shared trauma, but it also foreshadows the harshness that's coming for the Shimerdas themselves. Because winter on the prairie, it's not a wolf attack, but in its own way, it's just as deadly. Let's talk about that winter.
The whole tone of the book shifts. The sun is gone. Cather writes, the low sky was like a sheet of metal.
Sheet of metal, that just feels so oppressive, cold and heavy.
And the Shimerdas are completely unprepared. They are freezing. They have a stash of potatoes, but the potatoes freeze in their dugout and start to rot. Mr. Shimerda owns one coat for the entire family.
And they all have to take turns wearing it.
Yes. And then there's the crazy boy, Marek, who is intellectually disabled. He sleeps in the straw with the horses just to stay warm. It's sheer degradation.
And this leads us to the mushroom incident. This, for me, is maybe the most heartbreaking moment of cultural misunderstanding in the entire book. It's quieter than the wolf story, but it hurts just as much.
It's utterly tragic. So the Shimerdas want to give something back. They've been receiving charity food, a bit of coal from Jim's family. And Mrs. Shimerda is a proud woman. She doesn't want to just take. So she brings Jim's grandmother a little sack of what she calls brown chips.
And she treats it like it's a treasure. She explains it's for cooking, to make gravy. Very good, she keeps saying.
And Jim's grandmother, a good woman, but a woman from Virginia, she looks at these strange brown shavings. She smells them. They smell earthy, pungent, foreign. And she just says, I'm afraid of them.
She thinks they might be dried meat from some queer beast.
And so she throws them in the fire.
She burns the gift.
And just as they're burning, Jim, the curious boy, pops one in his mouth. And he realizes it's a dried mushroom.
Probably a porcini or some other kind of wild mushroom from the Bohemian forest.
Exactly. Something that, to the Shimerdas, is an absolute delicacy. It's a piece of home, its flavor, its memory, it's the forest they've left behind, concentrated into this little chip. But in the context of the Nebraska kitchen, To the Virginia-born grandmother, it's just dirty, suspicious trash.
It symbolizes the total loss of cultural value. When you move your culture to a new context, your gold becomes someone else's dirt.
And your skills become useless. And your language becomes just noise. And that is the tragedy of Mr. Shimerda. He can't survive that. He ultimately, and this is the climax of book 1, he commits suicide because of this cultural suffocation. He just can't breathe in this new world.
And the way Cather writes these scenes, she never beats you over the head with the sadness. She lets the objects, the small details, speak for themselves.
Which brings us perfectly to Cather's own aesthetic theory. We have to talk about her concept of the unfurnished novel.
The novel dimmable.
Yes. It's from an essay she wrote a bit later in her career, but the principles are all over by Ántonia. She hated what she called mere verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude, meaning just listing a bunch of facts and details.
Right. She didn't want to catalog every single item in a room like a shopping list. Think of Balzac or the 19th-century realist. They would spend a page describing every button on a coat. Cather felt that was just clutter. She wanted the room to be empty.
So she could focus on the emotion of the room, not the furniture in it.
She wanted to capture, in her words, the inexplicable presence of the thing not named.
The thing not named. That is such a beautiful, haunting phrase.
Think about the mushroom scene again. She doesn't write a 3-page essay on the history of Bohemian mushroom picking and the pain of immigration. She just shows us the chips, the suspicious smell, the fire, and the boy's realization. The thing not named is the crushing weight of homesickness that Mr. Shimerda feels and the terrifying xenophobia of the grandmother. It's all there, but it's not explicitly stated. It exists in the silence between the actions.
It's the difference between taking a photograph of a room and painting an impressionist painting of it. The painting feels more real because it captures the mood, not just the geometry.
Yeah, it's the perfect analogy. And that's why her descriptions of the landscape work so well. She doesn't just map the prairie, she evokes the soul of it.
But the style, it relies so much on the narrator, on Jim, and we touched on this earlier. Is Jim a reliable narrator? Because we can't forget, he's writing this as a memoir looking back.
That is the million-dollar question of this novel. And the answer is almost certainly no, he's not reliable. We have to remember the frame story that opens the book. The Jim who is writing this story is a middle-aged, successful lawyer in New York, and he's deeply, deeply unhappy.
Unhappily married to a woman named Genevieve who sounds just exhausting.
She is. She plays patron to the arts, but doesn't really get it. Jim is lonely. He has no children of his own. So he decides to write this memoir to reclaim the only part of his life that felt real and happy, his childhood.
So he's looking back through a very thick pair of rose-colored glasses.
Tapper argues, and I think he's right, that Jim profoundly idealizes the past. There's a crucial quote in the introduction to the novel itself where Jim says, "Some memories are realities and are better than anything that can ever happen to one again."
Wait, read that again. Memories are realities and are better than anything that can ever happen to one again. That's devastating.
It is.
It means his real life is effectively over. He's just waiting to die.
It means he's living entirely in the past. And because of that, he turns Ántonia into a symbol. He's the one who says she is the material out of which countries are made. He stops seeing her as a real woman, a woman who has bad teeth sometimes or gets tired or makes mistakes, and he starts seeing her only as the pioneer woman.
A myth.
He turns her into a statue of the Earth Mother. And Tapper suggests this is why he can never actually be with her, why he never marries her. You don't marry a statue. You admire it. You put it on a pedestal. You visit it once in a while. But you don't live with it.
So he keeps her at a distance, frozen in time, to preserve his own fantasy of the golden age of his childhood. He needs her to stay on the farm so he can visit her every 20 years and feel better about his own empty life.
Exactly. Optima dies. Prima fugit. The best days are the first to flee. That's the epigraph of the whole book, from Virgil. Jim truly believes his best days are long gone.
Wow. So the whole book isn't just a story about Anthony. It's basically an elegy, a funeral song for his own youth.
And for the frontier itself. By the time he's writing this, the frontier is closed. The wild red grass has been plowed under. The wolves are gone. It's all fences and roads and telegraph poles now. My Ántonia is an attempt to capture the ghost of that freedom before it vanished forever.
Okay, let's try to sum this up. We've gone from the nothingness of that first arrival to the mythic terror of the wolves to the quiet tragedy of the mushrooms, and now finally to this idea of memory as a constructed myth.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I think what makes this deep dive so powerful is realizing that My Antonia isn't just a book about a boy and a girl on the prairie. It's a book about how we build our own identities out of the places we come from and the stories we tell ourselves.
And how we sometimes erase the complicated parts that don't fit that story, just like the winter snow covers the red grass.
There's that one famous image from later in the book, the plow against the sun.
Oh, it's one of the most iconic images in all of American literature. A plow has been left standing in a field at the end of the day, and as the sun sets, the plow is perfectly silhouetted against this giant red disk of the sun. For a moment, this simple tool of the farmer looks heroic, monumental, larger than life,
But then the sun sets.
and it's just a rusty old tool again.
That feels like the perfect metaphor for Jim's memory. For a brief moment, in the golden light of his nostalgia, these people look like giants, like mythological figures. But in reality, they were just people. People who were cold and hungry and struggling to survive.
That is what Cather captures so perfectly. The fleeting, beautiful moment where human effort feels grand and meaningful against the vast, indifferent cosmos.
So here is the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away. We've talked about how Jim Burden is writing this memoir to reclaim his own lost self, how he shapes Antonia into this perfect symbol of warmth and survival and the American earth.
But if Jim is the one telling the story, how much of the Antonia we read about is real?
Is it possible to love a memory more than you love the person who inspired it?
And are we all doing this all the time? When we look back at our own good old days, are we seeing the truth in all its messy reality?
Or are we just writing our own personal version of My Antonia to make ourselves feel a little bit better about the present?
That is the question Cather leaves us with, and it's a question that doesn't have an easy answer.
Think on that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the tall grass. We'll see you next time.